Hey, good morning, everybody. What a beautiful day to be outside. It is absolutely gorgeous out here. And I could think of no better thing to do on this gorgeous morning than to try to find a couple of those trees that we're working on identifying. So we're looking for the red pine and the white pine. And the main thing we're going to do now is identify them by their bark. So with that being said, I should let you know that I live in a city. And a lot of people think, to find the trees I'm looking for, I've got to go to a forest or a county park. I've got to travel a long ways. Nah, they're usually in our backyard. So, like I said, I am walking through my neighborhood right now, and I'm going to go find both of those trees, and we're going to make sure we can identify them using the information we learned about the bark of each one. So once I get to the destination, we'll visit again, and we'll take a quick look at how we can identify the red and the white pine. All right, here we are. And as I look into the sky, a lot of times pine trees, which are conifers, are pretty easy to find by their treetops. You can see the green. Now, it's currently not yet spring necessarily, and we can see that the leaves have not come out of the deciduous trees. However, these pine trees are easy to identify by the needles that stay green all year long. Now, I've got a pine tree there, I've got a pine tree there, and from a ways away, I can already start to see some of the characteristics of the bark. So let's go over here and take a look. Now, as I get close to this very specific pine tree, you can see obviously conifer. Now, let's get close to that bark, and what do we see here? Well, here we see this kind of rigid, deep grooved bark. And I'm gonna back up this camera just a bit. And you can see that this bark is not super flaky. It's kind of deeply grooved. It's pretty cohesive. It kind of all is in one piece. It doesn't seem like it's peeling off anywhere. And when we look at that bark all the way up, boy, that sure looks a lot like our white pine tree. Now, if I take a turn to the left, I can see there's another little pine tree over there. Let's go take a look at that pine tree. So as we get closer, I start to see some very distinct differences in that bark. So let's go over here quick and let's go ahead and take a look at this bark. Now this bark, pine tree, yep, sure is. Let's go ahead and get a little bit closer. Now this bark looks much different. In fact, here is the flaky, peely bark of a red pine tree. And if you look carefully, you can see it's almost reddish in here. Now, a lot of times you can identify the bark of a red pine tree. People call it a fish scale bark. Now, if you look carefully, you can see it's like the scales of a fish, and look, it flakes off super easy. Now that is a red pine. The needles look very similar to a white pine, but one of the main differences is, as we talked about earlier, is the bark. So this flaky, peely bark is indicative of a red pine tree, which again, just found in the backyard of my neighborhood. So we've got a red pine tree. Now, I can't quite help myself, but going a little bit further and seeing what else do we got. Because I see another big tall pine tree right over there. Let's go take a look. So as we get closer to this, we see that this pine tree does not have that flaky bark. In fact, this is again more of that hard grooved bark. And certainly then this is indicative of that white pine tree. And boy, is it a beauty. Look at that, nice and tall, straight, great white pine tree. And again, this bark, we can identify it right away. It is grooved, it is deeply grooved, it is solid. And again, when we make that switch, we'll go back to that red pine one more time. Boy, is it beautiful outside. Man, I love to be outside. When we come back to this red pine tree one more time for a comparison, here's that bark. Flaky, comes right off. The fish scale bark. And there you have it. That's your red pine, fish scale bark. And there's the bark of the white pine. Not scaly, very put together, deeply grooved. All right, that was awesome. Later on, we'll talk about needles, but we wanted to explore the bark and the differences between these two trees right here. Boy, there's another beauty of a white pine. Should we go make sure it's a white pine? Let's do it quick. Make our way down here. Yeah, as we get closer, what do we see? Is that bark the scaly kind that comes off like a fish scale? Nope, that's not. That's the deeply grooved one. And boy, that's a big one around. Holy cow. What a beautiful, beautiful white pine. All right, I'll meet you guys when we get back and we'll wrap this up. There's the differences between a white pine and a red pine and their bark. All right, we are back. And on my way back, I couldn't help but show you, I found that somebody had potted a little pine tree here. And it's a little too early to tell exactly what kind of pine this is going to be. We'll have to keep our eye on this. So we have red pine trees, which have scaly bark, very flaky bark, kind of reddish in color that kind of flakes off the trunk real easily. And then we have white pine trees, and they both have kind of those longer needles. But white pine has deeply grooved bark that really holds together well. And that is the main difference between our red pines and our white pines. Later on, we'll explore differences between other trees and their bark, and we'll go more into conifers, their needles, and how they reproduce using their cones. All right, well, that was the tree ID with red pines and white pines using only their bark. We'll explore more later. Thanks for joining me.